For centuries, human beings have categorized the natural world to make it feel safe. We put animals into neat little boxes. We give them names, titles, and associations that make sense to our fragile minds. But sometimes the fossil record spits out an anomaly so profoundly disturbing it shatters our illusions of safety. You have probably heard the whispers of a prehistoric creature known as the hell pig. The name alone conjures images of a feral beast, perhaps a giant, aggressive boar roaming the ancient plains. But there is a terrifying truth hidden deep within the bone structures of this prehistoric nightmare. We were wrong about it. We were completely and utterly wrong. It is not a pig. It never was. And the truth of what it actually is and what it was capable of doing is infinitely darker than any horror story we could have invented. Close your eyes and transport your mind back to the Badlands of North America, roughly 20 million to 30 million years ago. This is the transition from the Oligocene to the early Miocene epoch. The world was cooling. The dense, lush forests were dying out, giving way to vast, unforgiving and open plains. In this harsh new reality, there was nowhere to hide. Survival became a brutal game of size, power, and absolute ruthlessness. In the shadow of a dying sun, a silhouette stretches across the cracked earth. It is not moving with the cautious, calculated grace of a feline predator. It moves with the heavy, rhythmic thud of an unstoppable force. Every step vibrates through the ground. Imagine a creature standing over 6 feet tall at the shoulder. That is taller than the average adult man. Now add a mass of over 2,000 pounds of dense muscle, thick hide, and heavy bone. This is the Daeodon, the absolute apex of the Entelodont lineage. To look upon a living Daeodon would be to look upon a biological impossibility. Its body was robust, supported by long, surprisingly slender legs ending in cloven hooves, giving it a deceptive appearance of speed. A massive hump of muscle rested on its shoulders, holding up a head that defies all logic. Its skull alone was 3 feet long. Let that sink in. A head the size of a small dining table, equipped with jaws that could snap a modern crocodile in half. But let us return to the great historical lie, the name, the hell pig. When early paleontologists first unearthed the fragmentary remains of the entelodonts, they saw the cloven hooves, the general body shape, and the crushing teeth. They made a logical but fatal assumption. They grouped them with the suids, the pig family. For decades, museum dioramas and textbooks depicted the Daeodon as a monstrous, oversized wild boar, rooting around in the dirt for tubers and the occasional piece of carrion. It was a comfortable lie. It made the monster somewhat relatable to the animals we know today. But as the decades passed, science evolved. We found more complete skeletons. We analyzed the microscopic structures of their teeth, the intricate pathways of their inner ears, and the evolutionary development of their ankle bones. The results sent a cold shockwave through the paleontological community. The genetic and morphological evidence was undeniable. The Daeodon and all of the entelodonts were entirely removed from the pig family tree. They were reclassified. Their closest living relatives today are not found wallowing in farm mud. Their closest living relatives are the hippopotamus and the predatory carnivorous whales that patrol our deepest oceans. You are not looking at a giant pig. You are looking at a terrestrial, armor-plated killer whale with legs, a beast that evolved on land, carrying the violent, territorial instincts of a massive bull hippo, combined with the flesh-tearing anatomy of an apex marine predator. This revelation changes everything we thought we knew about its behavior. Pigs are generally omnivorous foragers, but a creature related to the great predatory whales? That is a creature designed for absolute domination. This brings us to the core of our dark thesis. The Daeodon was not just an animal trying to survive in a tough ecosystem. It was the physical manifestation of biological terrorism. In the ancient Badlands, there were many skilled hunters. There were packs of apex predators, fast and lethal, that would spend hours tracking, exhausting, and finally bringing down their prey. They earned their meals through speed and strategy. The Daeodon did none of that. It did not need to. Mother Nature did not design it to be a stealthy assassin. She designed it to be a living, breathing engine of extortion. It was a klepto-parasite on a scale the Earth had never seen before and has never seen since. It operated on a single, terrifying principle. Why hunt when you can simply take? But an extortionist needs a weapon. They need a way to ensure that absolutely nothing on the continent would dare stand against them. And the Daeodon possessed a weapon so extreme, so perfectly engineered for violence, that it remains a paradox to this day. If you look closely at the massive, 3-foot skull of the Daeodon, you will notice something deeply unsettling. Protruding from its cheeks and extending down from its lower jaw are massive, grotesque flanges of solid bone. They look like giant, bony tumors. They look like a terrifying mutation. For a very long time, these bone extensions were a total mystery to science. Why would an animal carry so much unnecessary weight on its face? What evolutionary purpose could possibly require a predator to grow thick, bony shields right beneath its eyes? The answer to that question reveals the true horror of the Daeodon. To understand the bone shields, we have to look at the only creature on Earth brave enough and violent enough to attack a fully grown hell pig. And that creature was another hell pig. To comprehend the sheer violence of these intraspecific battles, we must first analyze the architecture of the Daeodon jaw. Nature is generally efficient. Predators evolve the exact amount of bite force necessary to kill their specific prey, and no more. A saber-toothed cat relied on surgical precision. A modern wolf relies on exhaustion and the numbers of the pack, but the Daeodon relied on absolute, catastrophic trauma. When paleontologists examine the skulls of these titans, they find muscle attachment points so immense they completely redefine our understanding of mammalian bite force. We are talking about jaw muscles thick enough to function like industrial hydraulic presses. When a Daeodon clamped its jaws shut, it did not slice through meat. It pulverized whatever was caught between its teeth. The front teeth were pointed and lethal, designed to grip and tear. But the true horror lay in the back of its mouth. The premolars were massive, blunt instruments of destruction, coated in unusually thick enamel. These were not the teeth of an animal that simply ate meat. These were the teeth of a bone crusher. But here is the next piece of our biological puzzle. Why would a predator need to eat bone? Bone is incredibly difficult to digest, and attempting to crack open a massive femur carries a severe risk of shattering a tooth. In the unforgiving prehistoric world, a broken tooth usually meant an inability to eat, leading to a slow, agonizing death by starvation. To answer that mystery, we have to look at the hunting grounds of the Oligocene epoch and the terrified victims of the Daeodon's reign. If you are still with me, and if the brutal reality of the prehistoric world has not scared you off yet, type the word fossil in the comments down below. Let me know you are one of the few who can handle the absolute, unfiltered truth of our planet's history. Now return to the crime scene. The primary hunters of this era were fearsome creatures like the hyanodons and the massive bear dogs. These were highly specialized, incredibly lethal pack hunters. They would expend enormous amounts of energy running down their prey across the open plains. When they finally made a kill, they were exhausted, panting, and highly vulnerable. And that is exactly what the Daeodon was waiting for. It did not want to run. It let the apex predators do all the grueling work. Through a highly developed olfactory system, the Daeodon could smell the iron-rich scent of fresh blood from miles away. It would track the scent, approaching the kill site with an unnerving, silent confidence. Imagine being an apex predator. You and your pack have just taken down a massive herbivore. Suddenly, a creature the size of a rhinoceros, armed with the jaws of a killer whale and a skull coated in natural bone armor, steps out of the brush. It does not display fear, it does not negotiate, it simply walks forward. The mere psychological pressure of the Daeodon was enough to clear an entire kill site. The bear dogs would abandon their hard-earned meal and flee into the tall grass, terrified of being crushed. This is where the thick enamel and the bone-crushing jaws come into play. The Daeodon was a scavenger of the highest order, but it was not picking at scraps. Because it arrived after the kill, it needed to extract every single ounce of nutritional value from the carcass to sustain its massive 2,000-pound frame. It would eat the meat, yes, but then it would use those hydraulic jaws to snap the femurs and crush the ribs. It consumed the rich, calorie-dense bone marrow that other predators simply could not access. It was essentially erasing the prey from existence, leaving no archaeological trace behind. But this strategy of biological extortion presents a terrifying new anomaly. If the Daeodon was essentially immune to predation, and if it could simply steal food from every other hunter on the North American continent, it should have multiplied uncontrollably. It should have conquered the entire globe. Yet the fossil record shows that their populations were surprisingly sparse. They were relatively rare. They were solitary ghosts of the plains. If nothing in the ecosystem could hunt them, and acquiring food was never an issue, what invisible force was keeping the ultimate monster in check? What horrific truth about their life cycle prevented the hell pigs from overrunning the Earth? The answer lies in a biological imperative so dark it borders on the realm of true madness. When a predator reaches the absolute pinnacle of its food chain, it faces a unique biological crisis. With no natural enemies to cull the weak or control the population, a species runs the risk of consuming all available resources and starving itself into extinction. Nature requires balance, and if nothing in the ecosystem is capable of killing the apex predator, the predator must become its own executioner. This is the grim reality of the Daeodon life cycle. The reason these 2,000-pound titans did not overrun the North American continent is because they existed in a state of perpetual, hyper-violent warfare against their own kind. The Daeodon was a strictly solitary creature. It did not form packs, it did not tolerate neighbors. The prehistoric plains were divided into massive, invisible territories ruled by solitary tyrants. When two adult Daeodons crossed paths, it was not a social interaction. It was a brutal clash for absolute dominance. Remember the massive, bony tumors on their cheeks? The built-in riot armor we discussed earlier? This is where that anatomical anomaly was put to the ultimate test. When they fought, they did not use their hooves. They engaged in a grotesque display of jaw wrestling. They would open their mouths to an impossibly wide angle, exposing those bone-crushing teeth, and literally attempt to bite down over the entire skull of their rival. Paleontologists have uncovered numerous skulls bearing the scars of these encounters. We see puncture wounds up to 2 inches deep, driven straight into the bone of the snout, the eyes, and the brain case. Some of these wounds show signs of healing, proving the animal survived the trauma and lived to fight again, but many do not. This extreme intraspecific aggression meant that the mortality rate among adult Daeodons was staggeringly high, but the violence did not stop with territorial disputes. It extended to the very survival of their lineage. In the brutal economy of the prehistoric Badlands, a juvenile daeodon was not seen as the future of the species. To an adult male, a juvenile was simply a future competitor or an easy meal. The concept of infanticide is common in the animal kingdom, but for the hell pig, it was practically a biological imperative. A mother would have to fiercely hide her offspring in the thickest brush, defending them aggressively against every shadow, including the very males that sired them. Only the most vicious, the most paranoid, and the most physically imposing offspring survived to adulthood. They were born into a world of zero empathy, shaped by a crucible of cannibalistic violence. If you are captivated by these dark, unfiltered realities of prehistoric survival, and you want to continue uncovering the terrifying secrets buried beneath our feet, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We are building an archive of the Earth's most lethal predators, and the deeper we dig, the darker the truth becomes. This cycle of violence kept their numbers low and their genetics incredibly strong. For millions of years, this strategy worked flawlessly. The daeodon was the undisputed king of extortion. As long as there were other predators making kills, the hell pig could steal them. As long as there was flesh and bone to crush, their massive caloric needs were met. But here is the final chilling anomaly in the case file of the daeodon. They were virtually indestructible. They were immune to predation. They were armed with the most devastating jaws of their era. They were the ultimate biological tanks, engineered to survive the harshest conditions and the most violent encounters. So, why are they not here today? If they were so perfectly adapted to rule, what could possibly possess the power to wipe out a creature that feared absolutely nothing? The answer lies not in the jaws of a bigger monster, but in a silent, invisible killer that slowly crept across the entire planet, destroying the daeodon's empire from the ground up. To understand the fall of an indestructible empire, we must confront a terrifying truth about evolution. The Earth is a graveyard of kings. Mother Nature does not care how thick your armor is. She does not care how hard you can bite or how much terror you inflict upon your ecosystem. When the rules of the game change, the most specialized players are always the first to die. And roughly 19 million years ago, the rules of the prehistoric world changed with ruthless efficiency. The invisible killer that wiped out the hell pigs was not a bigger, deadlier predator. It was the climate. As the Miocene epoch progressed, the global temperature continued to drop. The dense, subtropical forests that covered much of North America began to vanish, retreating into isolated pockets. In their place, a new, unforgiving environment expanded across the continent, the great open grasslands. This dramatic shift in the landscape triggered an ecological arms race. The prey animals, the ancient camels, the early horses, and the grazing herbivores had nowhere left to hide. The forests were gone. To survive on the open plains, they had to evolve one specific trait. They had to become marathon runners. Over thousands of generations, they grew longer, lighter legs. They became incredibly fast and relentlessly enduring. And this was the beginning of the end for the daeodon. Remember our dark thesis. The daeodon was not a runner, it was an extortionist. It relied entirely on the success of other predators to secure its massive caloric needs. But as the prey animals became faster, the traditional hunters of the era began to fail. The heavy, muscular ambush predators could no longer catch their meals. The formidable bear dogs, the very animals the daeodon relied upon to do the dirty work, found themselves exhausted and starving. The kill sites became incredibly rare. The ecosystem was experiencing a total biological bankruptcy, and when the hunters starve, the extortionist starves. This is the tragic irony of the hell pig. The very traits that made it the absolute tyrant of the Oligocene became the heavy anchors that dragged it into extinction. A 2,000-pound body is an engine that requires massive, constant fuel. A 3-foot skull made of dense bone armor requires an astronomical amount of calories just to carry around. When the food supply vanished, their greatest weapons became their ultimate doom. The Daeodon could not adapt to grazing on tough grass. Its teeth were designed to crush bone, not grind vegetation. It could not chase down the new, lightning-fast herbivores. It was trapped in a body built for a world that simply no longer existed. One by one, the solitary giants fell. They did not go out in a blaze of glory or a clash of titans. They simply walked into the dusty horizon, weakened, starving, and ultimately forgotten. The bone-crushing jaws fell silent. The reign of biological terrorism came to a quiet, pathetic end. When we look at the fossilized skull of a Daeodon today, we are not just looking at a monster. We are looking at a grim reminder of our own insignificance. It is a monument to the fact that absolute dominance is just a temporary illusion. No matter how perfectly adapted a creature is, no matter how much fear it commands, the Earth can and will simply change its mind and wipe the slate clean. If the story of the Daeodon has left you questioning your place in the natural order, then you have just scratched the surface of the nightmare that is our planet's history. There are secrets buried in the dirt that are far more terrifying than the Hell Pig. I have compiled the most disturbing, heavily researched case files of ancient apex predators into an exclusive, comprehensive e-book. It is the ultimate guide to the monsters that time tried to erase. You can find the link to secure your copy in the description below. And if you want to support this channel's mission to unearth these dark truths, consider joining our ranks on Patreon or dropping a tip in the Buy Me a Coffee link, also down in the description. Your support is the only thing that keeps these investigations alive in the dark. Until next time, respect the earth beneath your feet, because you never know what is buried just beneath the surface.